Good evening and welcome to week 2 of classes in term 1 of PLAR English. We are on class number 4 of PLAR English. So the first 3 classes are up on YouTube. So thanks if you're tuning in live, and if you're watching at your own time on YouTube, that's great too. So welcome back to PLAR English. The last day of class is November 2nd. We're on week 2, and we will have 9 weeks in total. And we meet every Tuesday and Wednesday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Once again, want to give you a reminder to enter the draw for an iPad. So you can do that, but you have to submit your first 2 lessons by this date right here, October 17th, for a chance to win an iPad. Every student who does that will be entered into the contest for an iPad, so don't miss out on that opportunity. So get your work in now. I want to just briefly, put this page up again. There are numerous ways you can watch and listen to the recordings live. I will be posting this information frequently on the Facebook page. So this is how you watch and listen live. And of course, you can always watch the videos later on YouTube. I'm putting them up there the day after they go live. There's lots of ways you can submit work to me. So just review that. And if you have any questions on how you submit work, if you have any questions about your work, you can talk to your local DEC. You can reach out to me. So if you're unsure about anything, always reach out to someone, ask questions. That's how you get things done. I know what it's like. I'm just thinking back to my earlier student days. I was really shy, was afraid to ask questions, and then would miss deadlines. So I know what it's like to feel that way, but reach out to someone if you've got questions. We're here to help you. These are the ways you can get in touch with me. Like I said, I have these 2 email addresses. You can find me on Facebook or Messenger. A bunch of you have done that and have reached out. So I'm going to be reaching out to you, adding you as a friend on Facebook. So this Laverty-Wassa is my professional Facebook account. I do have a personal one, but this account, this Laverty-Wassa, that's strictly business. So I only conduct Wassa school business with that Facebook account. So if I reach out and add you as a friend, I'm doing so because I want to send you course material and just answer your questions about the course and help you the best I can. And you can also phone. My cell phone is there, and my work extension is there. So get in touch with me. That's the bottom line. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. These are my office hours. This is when you're going to find me in the building, and this is the time when I'm going to be the most responsive to your questions. Okay, so it's not that I can't answer your questions outside of these office hours, but if you want to ask me a question and you want me to answer it right away, these are the best times you want to do it. So of course, Tuesday and Wednesday, you're going to find me here in the studio from 6 p.m. to 6:55 teaching. So I'm teaching during this time, so I am not going to be able to answer your questions unless you're on the air with me. Then of course I can do that. But if you have questions about the course and you want to phone me, email me, send me a message on Facebook, the time to do that is listed here. That's the best way to get in touch with me. And I just want to give you a reminder to read the study guide, reach out to me if you haven't done that, and read pages 1 through 30 at the very least of lesson 1. Starting into next week, I'm going to be asking you to start wrapping up lesson 1, because starting with next week's class on Tuesday the 20th, I'm going to be going into lesson 2. So I'm hoping to wrap up lesson 1 with this tonight's class, and starting next week, we're going to be getting into lesson 2 of the material. So with that, we will jump right into tonight's lecture. Okay, so PLAR English, here's our word of the day. Actually, I've got to change that because I cannot see everything. Let's go to view. We're just going to keep it like that. I got to figure out a way I can get that whole screen on there without losing a lot of my text. So I need to change the size of my slideshow. So I'm always editing, trying to tweak things. This here is one of my most favorite painting. It's a painter by the name of Lauren Harris, and he's a painter with the group of 7. And he painted this, and this is actually his depiction of Lake Superior, right? I believe this is like an old tree that's sort of died by the shore, and he painted that. So I like him. It's almost like kind of like a cartoon. It's lots of round edges, lots of bright lights. I love his work. So yeah, that's a depiction of Lake Superior. So in English it's Lake Superior. In Ojibwe it's Gichigami, which translates to Lake Superior. There's the map of it there. Lake Superior is massive. It is a huge lake. It's the largest freshwater lake in the world. I've been on it several times. I've been to Thunder Bay many times, and I've actually driven. I used to live in Windsor, Ontario, so we would live next to Detroit. So I drive up through Detroit. I actually drove down 8 Mile. For anybody who's seen the M&M movie, I've driven past 8 Mile. So I would drive here, and I've driven this highway a few times. So this is called the UP, and I would drive there, and then I would come up through Duluth, and that's how I would get back home to Sioux Lookout that way. So I've been on the north shore of Lake Superior, and I've been on the south shore of Lake Superior. It's a beautiful lake. So Gichigami is a noun. It's a thing, and it literally means Lake Superior, or it could refer to a very large lake. I like to make the comparisons between indigenous languages and English. So even though this is an English course, I think it's important to respect the land we're on and the students enrolled in this course. I mentioned this yesterday that I speak English, I can kind of read French, and I really respect people who know more than one language. And I'm trying to learn a little bit more Ojibwe especially now that I work at WASA. So I'm learning along with this language. I don't speak the language. I wish I did, but I'm trying to learn a few words here and there. So, and again, I'm really hoping people can correct me if I'm pronouncing things wrong. So, I'm not pretending to be an expert. I'm definitely a rookie when it comes to Anishinaabemowin. So please correct me if I am not pronouncing these things right. So Giche or Gije is technically, it's not a word. It's actually a preverb or a prefix. So it doesn't typically stand on its own, but it means great or big, and it modifies something. So, Manitou or Manitou is a spirit, and then when that word is sort of added to the front, you get, great spirit or great, the creator or God. So Giche or Gije, it functions the same way as superior in a sense. It's great, it's big, it's, larger than life. In English, the word superior is an adjective, and it means higher in station, rank, degree, importance. So Lake Superior is the largest. Look at that. I spelled the word largest wrong. Look at that. Good thing I'm catching my mistake. It is the largest lake in the world by surface area. So I believe that Lake Baikal in Russia might actually have more water in it. Like it might actually be deeper. But Lake Superior, just in terms of how much land it covers, 82,000 square kilometers. That's just absolutely massive. So Lake Superior is a very fitting name for this lake. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I want to mention again that learning these 9 parts of speech is really important. I don't want you to skip over that. Learning these 9 parts of speech is very foundational. And I like to draw comparisons with teaching music and playing music. So this is the fundamentals, right? So you need to know these things, and you need to know them very, struggling for the right word here, ironically, but you need to just know them off by heart. You just need to know what these things are without looking them up in a list of definitions. So I want you to look at this list of 9 parts of speech and know what all of them are and be able to come up with your own examples, right? So if you can do that, you can answer a lot of the key questions in lesson 1. So I'm not going to go through them, but it's in my slide deck. And I'm going to put this slide deck online. So I'll put a Facebook link so you can review this, so you don't need to take notes of this necessarily. So I'm going to share my slide decks with you, but know what a noun, verb, and pronoun are. You should know what an adverb, adjective, article are. And you need to know what a conjunction, preposition, and an interjection are. And then you can impress people, There's lots of people out there who don't know what these things are. And but like I said, they use them all the time. But I need all of you to learn what they are and to have those definitions kind of in your back pocket ready to go. So I'd like to continue this tradition. I'd like to give you a headline every class. So here's today's headline. We got this gentleman right here, Pierre Poilievre. He promises a new law against government jargon. So he was just recently elected. This is actually an older headline because you'll see here it says Pierre Poilievre was waging one of his final battles in the conservative leadership race, which he won. One in which even his main rival is onside. His latest target, the jargon used by the federal bureaucracy. So this guy is the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He wants to be the next prime minister. And one of the things that he talks about a lot when you interview him and when he's out there on the campaign trail is he talks about government using language that people don't understand or confuses the average person, and he's promising this new law against government jargon. So wanted to make sure everybody was familiar with that word. I pulled up the this is the dictionary.com. It's a little bit blurry, but I hope you can read that at home. This is the dictionary.com version or definition of the word. So I love dictionary.com. It's free, but it's great. So if we look up the word jargon, it tells you how to pronounce it phonetically, so jargon, and or jargon apparently, but I've jargon seems to be the most common pronunciation that I've heard. Now, one thing I'd like to talk about today is every word has a dictionary definition, but it has different denotations and different connotations, right? So there's actually, if you look here, there's actually 5 different definitions of jargon as a noun, and there's actually 1 as a verb. I've never heard someone say that they're going to jargon, like tonight I'm going to jargon, but apparently it is a verb. I've never heard that before, but there you go. Usually it's one of these nouns, right? So technically it could be the language, especially the vocabulary particular to a particular trade, profession, or group. So there's medical jargon. There's musical jargon. There is if you're a contractor, if you're a plumber, if you work in hairstyling, everybody has their lingo, right? We all have the words that we use, right? So this is not the definition that he's thinking of. Unintelligible or meaningless talk or writing, gibberish. It's not that one either. Any talk or writing that one does not understand, not really. Pigeon. Now, a pigeon is a very unique word. A pigeon is when 2 languages meet and they create this sort of like hybrid that's not really a language, but it helps them understand each other. But I think the definition from that article would be number 5. So it's any language that is characterized by uncommon or, this is a great word, pretentious vocabulary and convoluted syntax, and is often vague in meaning. So that basically just means very complex, overly complex, like writing that is just way too complex than it needs to be. And I think a lot of writing is like that, unfortunately. And I think that what you should strive for, and is simplicity. And so this guy Pierre Poilievre, he wants the government to speak to people more plainly, right? And so you may disagree or agree with this guy's politics, but I kind of agree with what he's saying there, and we should make things plain that people can understand them, right? So he actually referenced the author of The Little Prince, great book, right? Who said, "Perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." So Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he said that quote, not in The Little Prince, but I think in like an interview, right? So he said, you know, good writing is simple writing. You know, I think there's sometimes a misconception, or people have this idea that good writing has to be like elevated and fancy, and you have to go to school for 10 years to be a writer, and it's like only for a chosen few. But like really, you know, I think the best writing is clear and simple and powerful. And you only get really clear and powerful writing when you spend a lot of time on it, right? So it might seem simple and you know, not much work went into it. It looks effortless, but you know, good writing is usually simple and powerful, and it's because every word counts. It's very lean. There's no extra words, right? That's my opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree with that. Another famous writer, a guy by the name of George Orwell. You may have heard of him. You may not have heard of him. You may have only heard of his most famous book, 1984. He's famous for saying that we should never use a long word when a short one will do. If it's possible to cut a word out, always cut it out. Now that right there is probably the best advice for anybody who's writing in the English language. I agree with that 100%. If a word can be cut, you should probably cut it. And never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. So keep your writing plain, keep it simple, keep it powerful. There's nothing wrong with expanding your vocabulary and learning new words, but you know, if the shoe fits, you should use it, right? So I think that there's a lot of power in writing that is simple and only uses as many words as it needs to use, right? And I've been teaching writing and English for a while now, and I really encourage my students to write the way that they talk. And I did mention in my first lecture that there are differences, for sure, between the way we talk and the way we write, but they're really not that different. You do have to learn to be clear in your writing, and when you're having a conversation with someone, you can see them and make eye contact with them and see how they're feeling and if they're raising their voice, but you know, the way you speak is not that much different from the way you write, you know, and it comes from the heart, right? So I want to have a look quickly at this this headline. Pierre Poilievre promises new law against government jargon, and do what we did last class and just look at these things, right? So so Pierre and his last name Poilievre are a noun. It's just like the Ukraine forces we looked at yesterday. We can take that as a noun phrase, or I can just treat that as a noun, as one noun, right? So it's one thing. It refers to one person, right? Promises is what he does. He's promising a new law. He's not promising a law. He's promising a new law. So the adjective new modifies the noun, or the noun law. Against is a preposition. It gives a relationship, right? So you can be for something, you can be against it. Prepositions are about relationships and locations. So it tells us where something is. It tells where someone stands on an issue. Are you for this issue or are you against it? That's it's sort of like picking sides, right? Are you on this side or are you on that side? So against is a preposition. Jargon. We just looked that up. It's a noun. Now, the word government, you might think that the word government is a noun, and in many cases, the word government is a noun. But in this case, it's an adjective because it's telling us the type of jargon we're talking about here. It's not just any kind of jargon. It is government jargon, right? It's modifying that word right there, okay? So that's one tricky thing you have to navigate when you're reading. Sometimes words can be verbs. Sometimes they can be nouns, right? It's the word promises. I can make my students many, many promises. those are nouns. Those are things. But if someone is promises something, they're doing it, right? That's the act of promising, right? So sometimes a word can be a noun, sometimes it can be a verb, right? It depends on the context. Context is huge, right? So, and context just means the words that are around that word, right? So when you're first learning English, so when kids are in grade 4 when they're 4 and they're 5 and they're 6 and they're just learning how to read, they might come across a word in a book, or they might hear someone talk and they don't know what the word means, but they have lots of clues based on the words that are around that word. So that's the context. Context is, what words are around that word, and how is the word being used. So I want to just do a quick refresh from yesterday. We're talking about subject, and remember, the subject of a sentence is the person, place, or thing the sentence is about. And remember, person, place, and thing is our definition of a noun, right? So the subject is, usually, almost always a noun, right? And the predicate is what we say about that subject. And the predicate includes a verb. So the predicate is what is happening in the sentence, right? So the subject is what the sentence is about, the most important thing, and the predicate is what happens, right? So have a quick look at that. What's the subject? What is the predicate? So again, this subject, sure, it is about government jargon, but that's a secondary meaning, right? Or secondary importance. This sentence is really about this man right here. That's who we're talking about, right? So he comes first, and the things that he does, they come second, right? So that's the order, right? He's the most important thing in the sentence, and this stuff is the second most important thing in the sentence. He's the subject, and the predicate is what he did. So he's the subject, and the predicate is he promises new law against government jargon. Oops, where am I now? I'm losing my slides here. There we go. Here's where we left off last night. So I want to just briefly go through this with you, okay? So verb tense. And I mentioned yesterday that there are more than 3 tenses in English. There's past, present, and future. These 3 are I would say these are the main or the most commonly used, right? And then within these 3, there are different versions of them. For example, like future tense, there's things that you want to do in the future. There are things that you hope you will do in the future. There's things that you actually did in the past. There's things that could have happened in the past. And so really, they're all like within these, like these are the, and these, I would say these are the 3 main categories too, right? The 3 main categories of when things happen. Things can be happening right now, things can happen in the past, or things can happen in the future, right? And the other tenses are just variations upon that, right? So, but you really need to understand past, present, and future. And you need to understand them because you got to pick the right verb for the right situation. So I'm drawing some examples from my life. The last 10 minutes of class or so, I'm hoping to go through some writing with you. I'm going to be talking about playing guitar. That's going to be my I'm going to draft some ideas for my information paragraph. So if you've looked ahead, you'll see that the last key question of lesson 1 is asking you to move beyond studying parts of speech and studying commas and punctuation, and you actually writing your own paragraph. So it's a nice culmination. It's a nice sort of way to finish off lesson 1. So my paragraph, which I will write along with you, is going to be about playing guitar. So if I'm talking about myself in the past tense, I say I played my guitar in the garage last night. If I said I play my guitar in the garage, if I say I play my guitar in the garage last night, that is not correct, okay? That's not consistent, okay? So the verb tense would not agree with the situation, right? So I have to say played. Most past tense verbs are going to end in D, right? So I played, I, or if you can run, you ran. You can say something, but you said it. So a lot of them do end in a D when they are the past tense, either D or ed, depending on what the word is, right? But that's how you would write that in the past tense. In the present tense, I would say I am playing my guitar in the garage. My is a preposition that stands in place for I. So I am playing my guitar in the garage, and I hear Mike playing his guitar in the garage. So I included some pronouns and antecedents in here again, right? So Mike is a proper noun, and then his replaces it. And the ing form of the word, of the verb, that's usually in the present tense, right? I'm running a marathon, that person is playing the guitar, and yeah, so that's the present tense. That's happening right now. And the future tense is I plan to play my guitar in the garage tonight, and I will play my guitar in the garage tonight. Both are in the future tense, okay? And so I've highlighted the whole thing in green because technically that's the whole verb, right? So to play, that counts as my verb, right? Even though it's two words, that's my verb, and will play, that counts as my verb as well, right? So they kind of come together and they join forces to become a verb, right? So you wouldn't say I plan play my guitar. You would say I plan to play, and you wouldn't say I play my guitar in the garage tonight. You say I will play my guitar in the garage tonight. So you have to sometimes the verb, you have to use the right form of it. So we have played, playing, and play. But sometimes we have to add, like in this case, we add the word am, like I am playing. You wouldn't say I playing. You have to say I am playing. But in this case, I hear Mike playing his guitar in the garage. You wouldn't say I hear Mike M playing his guitar in the garage, right? So you have to write the correct verb itself, playing, and then you have to sometimes add a word in front to make it consistent, okay? All right, want to get into a little bit of capitalization here. So this is, a lot more straightforward than some of the stuff we've looked at in the past. It's really just, English is notorious. It's known for having tons of rules that are broken all the time. But these rules are very consistent, right? Like you always capitalize someone's name. There's very few exceptions. There's a very famous poet, and she goes by the name of Bell Hooks. And she intentionally spells her name with lowercase b and lowercase h, right? So there are exceptions, but 99.9% of the time, somebody's name, it gets capitalized. A title gets capitalized. And by titles, we mean like doctor, right? Dr. Smith, if you're a fan of Lost in Space, you ever see that show? So, Dr. Smith, the title is doctor, right? Or, doctor, or chief, or mayor, right? Those are titles. They get capitalized. Countries, provinces, regions, cities, names of pets. I don't know why I capitalized P here, right? Let's change that. Pets should not be capitalized. The name of the pet should be, but I don't know why I capitalized that. And the pronoun I, right? So there's an example. These are the kind of things that we do capitalize, and I want to give you an example here. So I purposely wrote this paragraph incorrectly, and we're gonna go through it and we're gonna mark it up and make it better. Okay, so I am an English teacher with Wassa Distance Education Center. I live in Sulikout, Ontario with my wife Natalie and our 2 boys Isaac and Mac. We have a dog named Snowy. All of that's true, but it has horrible capitalization, right? So very quickly, the pronoun I, we never leave it lowercase. It's always capitalized. I am in, and then English is always capitalized because English is always going to refer to English people or the English language. So we always capitalize languages. So I am an English teacher. English teacher, I think the T would be lowercase in this example, unless maybe I had like a business card that said English teacher on it. But in this case, I would say teacher would be lowercase. That one could be kind of borderline, but I personally would keep that one lowercase. Wassa is a proper noun. We are an organization, so we need to be capitalized. Distance Education Center. Every letter in our name, Wassa Distance Education Center, must be capitalized. And that's a complete sentence. Capital I live in Sulikout should be a capital. Sulikout. Now, when you tell someone where you live and you include the province you live in, you should always put a comma and capitalize the province you live in. With my wife, comma, Natalie gets a capital N, and our 2 boys, capital Isaac and capital Mac. And then we always start a sentence with a capital. So we have a dog named Snowy. And the names of pets get capitalized, right? So that's the way it should look there. So we've captured names, countries, provinces, names of pets, and the pronoun I in this example, and that's the way it should look, all nice and cleaned up. Oh, and I forgot my dog Snowy. Whoops, sorry buddy. You get a capital S. Here's another one. Family Day takes place on Monday, February 20th this year. I hope that our family will visit Winnipeg that weekend in Manitoba. They call it Louis Riel Day. I learned about him and the Métis people at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. So I'm reading that as if there's no punctuation, because there isn't, but I'm just trying to illustrate how when you don't have punctuation, you don't know when to stop and you don't know when to pause. So more on that in about 5 minutes, okay? So Family Day is a holiday, so we need to capitalize it. So Family Day, Victoria Day, July 1st, or Canada Day, right? These things all get capitalized. Family Day takes place on capital Monday, February 20th this year. Period. Capital I hope that our family will visit Winnipeg that weekend. In Manitoba, comma, they call it Louis Riel Day. So I know that because I live there. Yeah, so they don't call it Family Day. I believe it's Saskatchewan and Manitoba. They call it Louis Riel Day. Louis Riel is one of my most favorite people in Canadian history. I've read all his biographies and books. I think he's a really fascinating guy. So I love Louis Riel. And I have a shirt that I bought in Winnipeg. It says "Keeping It Riel." Let's see if I could wear that one day. So in Manitoba, they call it Louis Riel Day. You know what? I'm going to put a semicolon here. I learned about him and the Métis people, so capital M. I learned about him and the Métis people at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is true. Me and my brother went there this summer to the Canadian Museum of Human Rights. Amazing building, beautiful architecture, right down at the Forks in Winnipeg. So Métis are an ethnic group, so, you know, capital M for Métis. Company names, you know, Wassa. Holidays, you know, capital F family day. Whoops. Family Day, or, in Winnipeg, or Manitoba, sorry, Louis Riel Day. The names of buildings, in that case, the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and months and days, right? So March, February, and the days, right? They get capitalized too, right? So, and that's the way it should look. Let's see if there's any mistakes in there. Family Day takes place on Monday. So we put the comma after Monday right here, see? February 20th this year. I hope that our family will visit Winnipeg that weekend. In Manitoba, they call it Louis Riel Day. And I made that a semicolon. Remember, a semicolon separates two sentences that could stand on their own. So in Manitoba, they call it Louis Riel Day. And then, so that could be a sentence, and everything after could be a sentence, and then I combine them together, right? So, because I learned about Louis Riel when I went to that museum. They had a nice exhibit on everything he did. I want to touch briefly on punctuation. Okay, so this is towards the end of your course material. We go over some punctuation. So we have commas, of course, which look like that. Semicolons. So the colon and the semicolon look very similar, except that the colon is 2 dots and the semicolon is a dot with a little apostrophe on the bottom. And quotation marks. Now quotation marks come in the double variety, which you see here. That's a double. But they also come in the single variety, right? And I'm going to go through that in a bit with you. The double quotation marks is when someone has said something, and the single quotation marks are when you're trying to, when you've got a quote within a quote, or when you're talking about a specific word. Yeah, I'll show you that in a bit. But there's singles, there's double quotation marks, and there are singles. So that's the double, and the single is just the one, right? I love the show The Office, and the main character Michael Scott. So here's an example of punctuation. So because you asked, comma, here is my favorite quote from Michael Scott. I'm not superstitious, but I am a little stitious. So it's a very silly joke. You might call it a dad joke. The joke here being that stitious is not a word, but if you add the word super to it, it's very stitious, right? So that's the joke he made. It's a very cheesy, lame joke, but that's kind of what he does on the show. So when I read that, I say, because you asked, and the comma, it tells me to pause. So because you asked, pause. Here is my favorite quote from Michael Scott. And here I've used a colon. Now, a colon is used when you're introducing an idea or a word or a list of things. Like if you said, I went to the store and bought the following items. Colon, milk, eggs, cheese, butter, Reese's Pieces cups, Pepsi, whatever, right? Whatever you bought, right? That's so it's when you're introducing an idea, right? It's like the colon says, get ready for it. Here it comes, right? And it functions the same way as the comma, in that you pause after both of them. So, and then because I'm quoting him from the show, I'm using the double quotation mark. And then quotation marks are kind of like brackets, right? You have to have 2 of them. So that's my first quotation mark, and that's my second one. And that tells me that that's what he said from the show. That's the whole quote, right? So it's kind of like bracket 1 and bracket 2, right? So that's the whole quote. That's my favorite quote from the show, right? So that's an example of how we can use punctuation. Here's another example. Here is a passage I read in my English textbook. So again, you're setting up something with before the colon. So here is a passage I read in my English textbook, and the colon just says, here it is. And the colon is actually like it divides, you know, like these are my words, right? These are my words. These are the words that I wrote. But these words are the textbook words, right? And the colon is a way to divide that and to set it up, right? So here's a passage I read in my English textbook. So here's my first double quotation, and here's my second one. Now you'll also notice that there is a single quotation mark. That's number 1, and this is number 2. So it's sort of like a quotation within a quotation. So I'm quoting a book that I read, but inside that book is another quote, okay? So Shakespeare said, "All the world's a stage," which he did. It's one of his most famous sayings, right? So that's when you want to use the single quotation marks, when you have a quote within a quote. And so you do kind of get this awkward like 3 quotation marks in a row, but that's just the way it is. And if any of you are doing math right now, you might encounter that with mathematics, where you have like square brackets, and inside the square brackets you have round brackets, and you have brackets within brackets. So in the same way that in math we have brackets within brackets, sometimes in English we have quotation marks inside quotation marks. This comic is used not with permission, but I borrowed this from the oatmeal.com. Really funny website, and they teach you about grammar in English. I just find this very funny. So both bears and semicolons have pause, right? So a comma is a brief pause. A semicolon is a moderate pause, which is just like, a bit longer than a brief pause. And a period is a complete stop, right? So when you read a sentence and you come to the period, it's like a deep breath, right? So semicolons, the most feared punctuation on earth. How to use a semicolon, right? Using a semicolon isn't hard. I once saw a party gorilla do it. Let's see if I can move that around. Yeah. I once saw a party gorilla do it, right? So the semicolon, again, is dividing, it's dividing, yikes, 2 things that could easily be their own sentence. So, but they're combined together for a reason, right? So if you want to use the semicolon, everything on both sides of the sentence has to be a complete thought or a complete sentence, like with a subject and a predicate. Here we go. So here's some periods, question marks, exclamation marks, apostrophes. So I want to focus on the apostrophe right there. The apostrophe and the single quotation mark almost look identical, but they are different. And the apostrophe is used in many ways. So here's an example for you. I hope to teach my students to tell the difference between there and there. So I've used the single quotation marks because I'm talking about a specific word. That's another way you can use them. So after this course, their writing will improve, and they are going to go far in life. Okay, so the apostrophe is used to show possession, or it's used to show where a word is missing, right? So so they are is the long form of that word of there. So they apostrophe re literally means they are. But if I say, Mike's class, this apostrophe here shows possession. So whose class is it? It's Mike's class, right? Or Beth's bike. It's the bike that belongs to Beth, right? So the apostrophe either shows possession, what the noun belongs to, or the apostrophe shows a missing word, right? So that's how that works, right? The only exception to that is like its is possession, so the thing that belongs to it, and and this is it is, right? That you know, that's the only tricky one there. You have to navigate. So I think I'll come back to this one later, because I think I want to spend some time on these on this writing assignment. So so if you go to that last key question, it's asking you to write your paragraph. So I want to spend the last 10 minutes of class talking about that, and then we'll touch up on our types of sentences later. But so I want you to approach this writing exercise, with with a positive attitude, right? I think a lot of people have a hard time starting to write something down, and you might be familiar with the phrase writer's block. And sometimes it can be sort of like intimidating, or can be hard when you're staring at a blank piece of paper and you just don't know what to write. So that's why we encourage you to do writing webs, right? So this is like grade 2, grade 3 stuff, but it's really effective. And I think that no matter what stage of the game you're at, whether you're a best-selling writer making $1 million a year, or you're just someone like you kind of getting your high school credits, or whatever stage you're at in the writing game, you should be using these idea webs. They're very good ways to get started, right? So I've got one up here, and I want to demonstrate how I would do this if I was going to do it, and I will do it. So here's how I would do it, right? So I want to do how to learn guitar. So that's my topic, right? So that's my topic. That's what I'm going to be writing about. So when you do write a paragraph, your first sentence, your topic sentence, is going to be it's usually the first sentence of your paragraph, and it introduces the overall idea that the paragraph will discuss. So my topic sentence is going to be about how to learn guitar. So that's not my topic sentence, but that's my topic, and we're going to turn that into a good topic sentence, right? So how to learn guitar, and I'm just going to, I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so I'm just going to jot down like 8 ideas that come to mind. So the first thing that comes to mind is YouTube, right? So, and by YouTube I just mean watching lessons on YouTube. That's a really good way to do it, right? Another idea that comes to mind is acoustic versus electric guitar. That's really going to change how you approach the thing, right? I would talk about style, right? Are you metal? Are you folk? Are you country? Are you pop? What do you like? I would talk about your age, right? So how old is the student, right? So, are you 7, 77, 30? Kind of changes how you approach this thing, right? So, I would talk about your calluses, right? And your fingers, right? I might talk about playing. Are you playing alone, or with people, right? What are you going to be doing, right? So, and let's maybe number 5 here. I'm going to be saying, teacher or self-taught, And my last idea I'm going to talk about is, favorite I'm gonna say favorite song and playing along. You know, playing along to music, right? So I did this purposely. Like, I didn't plan this out with ahead of time. Those ideas are just coming to me right now. Those are the first 8 things I thought of. They may not be the most important, and I may use all of them. I may use only a few of them. I know I'm going to use some of them, but if I was going to write an information paragraph about learning how to play guitar, this would be some of the elements that I would come up with, right? And just looking at this list, I think that it's probably way too many ideas for one paragraph. But I would take a few of them, and I would start to pick like which ones I want to talk about, right? So but if I was going to write one paragraph, you know, on playing guitar, I would start to take some of these things and write my paragraph from there. So my topic sentence might be, learning to. Or how about this? I would say something like there are many ways to, maybe not teach, but there are many ways to learn how to play the guitar. Yeah, okay, so I think what happens when you're writing something, you often don't know where you want to take it until you start to write things down. So I didn't really know how I would approach this. Like, would I write an information paragraph that taught you how to actually play the guitar? Or am I writing a paragraph that's about different strategies for playing the guitar? And I think that's probably where I would take it, right? So you can't really teach someone how to play guitar in one paragraph, but one paragraph you could probably give them a lot of ideas on how they want to approach it. So I think for my information paragraph, that would be my topic sentence. There are many ways to learn how to play guitar. And then I would go back to my web here, and I would say, I would definitely want to talk about the YouTube watching lessons. So that's one way to do it. And I believe this. If you want to be a guitar player, you can do it by watching YouTube videos. There's so much out there. You could also get yourself a teacher, right? So you can be you can have someone teach it to you, or you can do it yourself. That's a really important decision. So and I would talk about maybe the instrument you're going to choose. What are you going to play with? Is it going to be an acoustic? Is it going to be an electric? Yeah, and then so going back in there, so my supporting sentences, I might have one about, are you going to be self-taught? Are you going to be versus a teacher? And I probably have a sentence about, making a plan, right? Making a plan / finding a plan, because sometimes these things are already out there, right? So, but, charting a plotting out a route, how am I going to get from being a complete rookie on guitar to someone who can play a song, right? And I would say, learn a song. One that's easy and one that you love, right? That's probably the best advice I could probably give someone if they want to be a guitar player. Find a song that's easy and find a song that you love. And that's probably the best thing you could do, right? And then once I have done the topic sentence and written some supporting sentences, I think that my concluding sentence is going to start to develop, right? But it really begins with this idea web and jotting your ideas down. And the final point I want to make tonight is that you have to, writing comes in two phases, right? You get your ideas on the page, and you don't worry about it all sounding perfect. Just get all your ideas out there, get as many ideas as you can on the page, and then, only then, do you then start to mold those ideas into something that you can work with, right? So get your ideas on the page and then work with them. We'll meet back here next week, and we'll talk a little bit more about sentence structure and writing, and we're going to look at some examples of professional writers. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.